And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Ammon's Bogus Hangout. We seem to have a full crew already, which lately has been kind of unusual. We're joined by. Let's start out the way we often do and see how everybody's doing and what they're up to this week. Ammon, how are you doing?
Well, been better. Yeah, it's not too bad. I got my new shoes today, so I'm happy. Oh, that did make me joyful. I wasn't expecting them quite so soon. This week I have been, well, still tinkering around with a rebrand, or well, more of a refocus of an existing brand. And little bits and pieces, but generally good stuff. Anyone else?
Doc, how have you been doing? What are you up to this week?
Doing good. Basically just took advantage of this weekend and managed to catch up with some of the personal things that have been getting pushed to the back burner for so long. And get some sites updated, and been digging into trying to learn a little bit more coding, digging into some JavaScript, and finding that I'm wondering why in the world I ever thought I wanted to learn this. As much as I struggled with PHP and CSS, I don't think that Java is going to be easy. But playing around with it, and it's kind of fun. See what I can break. I always like finding new things to break.
Mm-hmm. Christian, how have you been doing? What are you up to?
Yeah, I don't know. Skip me.
Okay, we'll get back to you. Terry, how have you been doing? What are you up to?
About 5'9.5". Oh, I'm just doing what I normally do, trying to keep the site up and get them ranking higher. Job doesn't change much. How you do it sometimes changes a bit, but the goal's always the same. I see that they released some new structured data coming up soon, Bill. I got that from one of your posts.
I've been following along with the changes, and it seems like there's always some coming up.
Yeah, that's why I like following you. I just read what you're reading, and I'm pretty well informed.
Of course, I read some odd stuff from some strange places. Like there was a new patent that came out today that was granted to Google that is about finding authority websites, not domain authority, but authority websites. And that led me to a new Google blog post from Ben Gomes, who's been with Google since 1999. And he talked about new signals of quality at Google, which had me reading a updated Google Raters Guide to Quality that came out on the 11th of this month.
Oh.
Did you notice that come out?
That's the first I've heard of it.
It's the first I've heard of it too. There was no Jen with an annotated guide to the whole thing. I'm not sure where she's at lately, but she joined us late last week, so hopefully she might show up again this week.
Right. Was there any talk of secondary content? that?
I really just started going through that guide.
Oh, okay.
So it talked about high quality sites and low quality sites, and it's not a surprise. It carries on some of the stuff they were showing before, like the eat stuff and so on. But there does seem to be some more talk about quality. And I guess you determine the authority of a website by the keywords that are mapped to it. It's the first time I've ever seen Google talk about keywords being mapped to web pages and having a authority site map or guide to the web. But they talk about how something like CDC might be a keyword for the Center for Disease Control website, and it might be an authoritative website for diseases, but it's not going to be an authoritative website for restaurant reviews. They're words, but it makes sense.
Have you got a link you could drop in the chat on that, Bill?
I'm writing a blog post about it, so I'll be out with something sometime soon.
Cool.
Just did we lose Ammon again?
No.
Seem to have.
So what was the semantic search stuff that you were looking at, Terry?
The last one I read was I went over quickly something about a new version coming out, 3.6, I think.
3.3.
3, okay. I just skimmed it really quickly. See, it's still in my email box because I keep them and then I read them when I have a chance. And I just skim it quickly to see if it's something that I do want to keep.
It said something about new language for how-to answers and setting up how-to results.
That would be interesting, especially if you're doing videos.
Yeah. You can get those long strings of lists of answers for how-tos, with the last one being a read more link to your website. It's always a good result.
Yeah. I found pretty well anything that you can get in with structured data helps you, especially with click-through. I had prices coming through from a site that seemed to help the click-through, especially if you have good prices.
We also noticed that if we take paragraph tags and change them to headers on pages, H2s, that those H2s will show up as lists and featured snippets.
I've seen that when they were numbered or lettered. I haven't seen it with just a plain H2, but if your H2s are numbered number 1, number 2, number 3, I've seen those pop up sometimes.
Yeah, this was happening without the numbers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially since H2, that doesn't even correlate to what its function is in HTML.
If Google at one point in time used to be able to make lists of your pages based on the headers on your pages. And if they're doing that with snippets, unordered lists, it's, I think, a good result. If it'll show what's on your page and give people a hint of what they can see if they click through.
Yeah, you would think with a list, though, it'd be easier to just use list markup, right?
If you're using lists on your HTML for your page, and they are headings for that content.
Ah, okay.
It's not a bad result. I mean, in the snippet, it's showing as a list. On the web page, it's showing as a heading.
Be interesting to see if you use some H3s as well. Will it recognize those as sub-objects of a list?
Can, because that H2 doesn't have the same function that it does in other HTML where that.
Well, I must admit, I mean, I use, a H1 for the title of the piece I'm doing, and then H2s for the subheadings. And if there are subheadings, I do use H3s. I wouldn't be surprised if Google starts to pick up on that.
Yeah, a long time ago, I was going through some HTML specifications, and it basically told what each one of those H1s were function actually was. And 1 was like the title, 2 was like a headline, 3 was a block, and then the others are blocks within that block. But
right, the way an outline usually functions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, standard.
Didn't quite hear that.
I said the way an outline usually functions.
Correct.
Yeah.
But when I was reading the specs for HTML5, I noticed that H2's role changed and headings kind of have changed. After I saw that, I just said, well, I'm not going any further or I'm going to get really upset.
They allowed for more segmentation, which was fine because this way you can have different parts of your page having different structures.
Yeah. And with structured data, the page itself is broken down in structured data, correct? So it makes sense that those headings would now have a different function than they did in older HTML.
Well, yeah, because design has changed. When they came up with the first specification, it was kind of an extension of the word processor, and it was really built for one sheet, one column. When people introduced, when tables were introduced, I think they were absolutely shocked that people started to use them for layout and to create 2-column designs. And now, of course, I mean, you've got sideways scrolling websites where the pages are effectively next to each other and you don't reload.
Mm-hmm.
You've got pages with tabs where actually you're switching pages via tabs on one page. And of course, it's perfectly reasonable for each tab to have a H1.
I was reading some stuff about the Web Tables project at Google where they're talking about taking semantics from tables they find on the web. And they're talking about tables filled with data, tabular data, rather than tables used for layout. And they said of the tables on the web, more than half of them tend to be used for layout purposes.
Well, at least, yeah.
Or more.
I would think that that's significantly changed today. I would honestly think that although there's going to be a lot of old websites still out there, I would be pretty amazed if it was more than 30% now that we're using it for layout. And even there, I think maybe half of those are old, outdated sites.
Well, they started the Web Tables project in 2007.
Yep.
So that's not necessarily a statistic applies to the state of tables today.
You also, Bill, I don't know about other people, but when I lay out a table with data in it,
Yeah.
it's usually within another table. Right? You have your table for layout, and then you have your table inside of that for data.
I usually just do the table inside a div and drop it in that way. I had to do one for a customer the other day that it's a WordPress site. I didn't have admin access. I only had editor access. So I just went in there and coded the table in HTML, and then I found out they've got this wonderful plugin that does tables. But I just dropped into a div. I've never done a table in a table. I guess you could, and no reason you couldn't, right?
That's in the old days.
Don't listen to Terry. He's a chef. Of course he overdoes laying the table.
Those are referred to as nested tables.
Yep.
That was big in the old days.
Yeah. Before CSS, you pretty much had to do that kind of stuff. But since CSS, I'd be questioning anyone who was, doing that today, I think.
Well, the early versions of CSS were pretty clunky. Some of them, you had to actually use JavaScript with it to make it work.
Well, I'd have been screwed.
That was the first CSS I saw. Use JavaScript to make it work.
Never seen that.
Now, that was a long time ago. But by the second version of CSS, they had all that and more figured out.
I want to get deeper into CSS3. I dug into it about a year ago a little bit, and it just amazes me how much more you can do with it now. Yeah. Basically, almost everything you want to do in a page, you can do with the CSS now, with the exception of links. Just about everything.
So much sort of even animated areas can be done very, very simply, and CSS has got a lot of
animation.
in it.
I didn't know you could do animation with it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think also there's audio that can be done with CSS. Different voices.
You could actually specify the voices for readers back in CSS2.
Right.
True, yeah.
Because it was something that, again, I did have a play with. It's no surprise, I'm always interested in the psychology of things, and I wanted to test out the differences in certain markets between a male voice and a female voice, an older voice, a younger voice, and so I tested those things out.
Does that content get picked up by search engines?
Unfortunately not, but if there are times, there are times when SEO it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's all done in context. Conversion is the most important thing. And then once conversion is right, you do all the things to get people to the site. But you wouldn't want to sacrifice conversion, to get people to what would be the point of getting, we got 10 times as many visitors, but now none of them are buying.
Well, yeah, but there's tens of thousands of so-called SEO experts out there doing it exactly that way. We'll get you traffic. We'll buy you traffic. We'll bring you all kinds of traffic. Conversion, oh, we don't do that.
We only get them there.
Yep. Not much sense in hanging a piece of bait on a string if you don't have a hook in it.
And again, you know, a thing that I've probably mentioned a few times, the rise in brand search. You know, SEO is often top of funnel stuff. It's the thing that introduces them. It's the discovery phase. It's the answer to a question, the brand building. But the payoff is once that brand is built, and they're more likely to come to you, and they're more likely to come to you through other methods, and they're more likely to come to your homepage, and they're more likely to remember that brand and search for it. But so many SEOs kind of, well, we used to get clients arguing, oh no, well, the brand, that's our business from our other marketing. Not in a vacuum, it's not.
Yep.
Comes back to that thing I always say. It's amazing how much good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. As long as you've got a customer who understands, look, this is the sales you're getting at the moment. This is the sales you're getting with SEO. A lot bigger, isn't it? We seem to have duplicate Christians.
Somebody's imploding her.
Yeah. She's trying to see if it enhances her quality rating.
Ah.
I can have a list of Christians in the snippet.
End up with a duplicate content penalty here. Now we have a canonical Christian.
Still muted, but hopefully working out the tech now. Yeah, I don't know what the issue with my software is tonight, but yeah, it's just not playing nicely with Google. Oh, looks like it does.
Google changed something.
Now, I did hear earlier you were kind of surprised that the rate of quality guidelines were mentioning quality more than usual. Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So whatever happened to Wolfram Alpha's open coding language? And then, like, what happened? Have you guys ever looked at it?
Which language are you talking about, Kristen?
Wolfram Alpha.
Oh yeah, I've looked at it, but like I think I signed up for it when they started that that beta thing, but it was over my head, so I never really got into it. But it's still active. I still get emails from them.
Coding for everybody.
It's some pretty powerful stuff. But they seem to still have an active community because I get emails every week from them, and a lot of discussion about this, that, and the other little project or questions and whatnot. So they have an active core of people still.
I know Disa talking about it the last time I got to talk to her, but she's like the only other person that I'd ever heard of, except for John Mueller, that talked about it. So I was curious.
It's one of those things that I keep a distant eye on, but at the moment it's not central enough for me to be focused on in any way. You've got to keep an eye generally on the state of AI. So you have to be aware of a lot of different initiatives, but you've also you've got to focus. You've got to understand the ones that you think are going to work deeply, and just be aware of the others. So that if something comes up, you know where to start looking.
Mhm. It's like today I saw a patent from Microsoft on a semantic query language, and thought to myself quickly after skimming it was Microsoft has Cortana, which is named after a character in a game about an AI figure. Maybe someday they'll actually figure out AI enough to beat Siri, but
Maybe. Anything could happen, right?
yeah.
Well, I'd actually say they've beaten where Siri was when they started, but of course Siri is constantly being updated as well.
Mm-hmm. See, Google came out with the voice recognition. They recognize up to 7 different voices now. Siri has a patent on that. They can recognize up to 16 different voices. So they came out with that like 3-4 years ago at least. So that's why you never saw commercials on TV with Burger King trying to trick people's Siris into ordering hamburgers from Burger King on the phone.
Well, partly that, and I think partly it's because the Alexa tends to sit in the room with the television. Google Home is very much going into the same sort of location. Siri tends to sit in your pocket mostly. Most people are using Siri on their phone. At least that's my experience.
Microsoft came out with the Harman Kardon speakers that do the same type of thing. Just sit there.
Yeah. I must admit, for me, Microsoft were ahead of everybody else in at least the research they were sharing about space and about living spaces and working spaces and how to use those.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
The stuff that they were doing with Kinect back in the day for the Xbox was just absolutely first rate, and I haven't seen anybody that's really ahead of that until recently looking at Magic Leap.
They sort of had 2 different divisions within Microsoft. They had Bing and they had Microsoft Research. And Microsoft Research Asia was really ahead of everybody. They came out with visual segmentation in 2003. They also had a semantic web search. They developed one for a product search for Microsoft, for MSN, and a scholar search in 2007.
Yeah. But I'd say, Bill, that over the years, Microsoft have had phenomenal research. They have just as many interesting patents and papers as Google does. Their research department definitely is not lagging behind.
Right.
In fact, they've had to jump on Google several times.
They seem to be a little
problem
more
is-
subtle about it now. They're not quite as vocal.
Yeah, because most of the researchers don't speak English. They're Chinese. No, seriously. I don't mean that as a joke. Seriously.
Yeah.
I think the difference is that Google's got its much flatter structure. It's much more of an academic arrangement, whereas Microsoft is still a corporate being, very company-oriented, top-down. And although the research department is well-funded and therefore can keep up with anybody, getting stuff through approval for actual product development or
Must be a
using
nightmare.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the research team was allowed to talk to the search team.
I'm not sure they're allowed out of the office.
I'm not
That's,
sure.
that's why they work so hard.
I wrote a blog post about a knowledge base Microsoft put together years ago, much bigger than the knowledge graph Google put together.
Hmm.
A couple years before Google started putting a knowledge graph together. And the day after I wrote that, I had a guy from Microsoft Research Asia who started following me on LinkedIn, who was the head of that department who had put that together.
Yep.
Wow.
It's like somebody noticed me.
That's nice to hear you say that, Bill.
Also, it's Bill. If anybody phones and asks if I leaked, I didn't say anything, did I?
I remember when I got a email from head researcher at AOL about a query study they did where they released user data, a large quantity of user data. And hello,
We go see if someone's okay.
Hello.
is everybody okay? I think there was a class action lawsuit because I got a manila envelope in the mail, a large one, that had a bunch of questions and asked me to answer them. And it started off with, did you use that query data from AOL? If you did, please tell us how, write it out. And I was at a conference when I received the email, so I never got to look at it. So I was a little bit too busy doing conference type things, like going to the bar after the sessions and drinking and all, and didn't have time to look through the queries.
Exactly. Got to get your priorities right.
Right.
That's it.
I do remember when that big leak happened, and you know, they'd accidentally released the data, and then suddenly realised, oh, hang on, this is the internet. People download stuff and then re-upload stuff, and oh yeah, genie's out of the bottle. Yeah. Now, I remember one person did dig into that in detail. We won't name him because he now works for a rival search engine, and I'm sure there is no connection between those two things. But yeah, it was interesting data, and it was one of the first times where we got to see firsthand just how many of these obscure and unusual search queries there were, because that was the kind of thing where, if you looked at the intent, it wasn't that different. And Google's current figures of around 17% are probably about right for intent even back then. But the exact wording, yeah, it was about 50% unique queries. About half of the data was searched exactly once in these billions of searches. I think that's sometimes where people don't really understand exactly what the long tail is.
A waste of time, in my experience.
Are you familiar with the phrase drop off in a query? It's like you do a search, you've got long tail terms. Google shows you search results. Amongst the search results, at the end of the results, they show you some of the terms that were used for the query that's showing that result. And for some of them, they cross out some of the queries. So they're dropping off. They're expanding your results by dropping off some of the query terms that you search for.
Not familiar with that at all.
No, okay. if you do look at your results, you will see sometimes the terms that were used to show each result after the result. And they'll cross some of them off.
Yeah. You've got the ones that, here's all the terms you used. Here's the ones that do not appear anywhere in this document.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a fascinating one. If you've got a 10-word phrase that's put into search, do you treat all words as equally important? Because the chances are they aren't, that a human would look and say, right, this is about these 2 words. These 2 are important modifiers and the rest would help, but they're optional.
If you type 10 words into the query box, the first word is something like CDC, as in Center for Disease Control. So the ideal result would be cdc.org. But if the rest of the terms have nothing to do with diseases in medicine or science, maybe it's not the authoritative site or the ideal result. Except chances are, because that's the first query you typed in, that may be the first result Google shows.
Yeah.
Because it tends to do things mechanically.
What I always thought was interesting is expanded searches. So somebody searches for life insurance and then discovers, there's lots of different types of life insurance. So they add a refinement. Now, technically, that 3rd word, the refinement, is the most important of them all, but they're not going to put it at the start.
No,
you're going to type it at the end. So I've always wondered if Google is smart enough to spot expanded searches and realize that the added words must be the most important or not.
Which is why that patent that I'm looking at this morning was kind of interesting, because it talks about that.
Yeah.
It talks about what happens when they add on queries to a original query. Maybe through looking at refinements or in some other way. And they might do some type of similarity comparison between the original term and the added term to see how similar they are.
I've always wondered, and I've seen scraps of data every now and again, but never anything really deep and definitive. And I'd love to. What percentage of searches are refined? What percentage of searches start off as 1 word or 2 word and I'd love to know the details on that. And the difference between, 1-word search and a 2-word search and a 3-word search in terms of how those get refined.
I saw
how
something.
many times somebody will refine a search before they just pretty much restart.
I did see something one time from Google, but it's been at least 3 or 4 years ago, when they talked about the percentage of searches that were 1 word, 2 word, 3 word, 4 word, etc.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's very dated now. I don't even, but it was from Google, so at the time it was accurate. But that's probably 4 years ago.
I remember a white paper like that to talk about smartphones and WAP type smartphones versus iPhone type smartphones, and compared the two. And they were saying that iPhone smartphone type results were much closer to desktop type search results because you could more easily type in queries. So the queries tend to be longer for iPhones than other types of smartphones.
Yeah. Certainly it's going to be increasingly common that people are using other methods to search than typing. One of the things you've talked about before, Bill, is image search. You know, where you can take a picture and then just add a couple of words to this. What's this building? What's this monument?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Google talked about that at the Google I/O conference this past week. They talked about something called Google Lens, which seemed to be a smarter version of Google Goggles.
Yeah. Where is this, or when was this taken? Yeah, I read something about that several months ago. In fact, was it on your blog, Bill?
It might have been.
I think it might have been.
But Google Lens talked about being able to go to town and take pictures of storefronts. And it would tell you, it would give you local search type results for what you're taking photographs of.
Yeah.
Which is nice because they're probably comparing your photograph to a street view photograph.
Well, yeah, which then brings up the interesting question is, could somebody take a picture of the front of a store and ask Google, where is this? And actually, through the street views, actually get an address and a map. You know, it's doable. You know, whether there's any ROI in handling that huge a database is a whole different question, but it's certainly something they could do.
The math behind that's trickier than you may think. I did see a patent where it talked about creating a boundary for business on a map, on a photograph in the storefront. To say this is all one business, everything in this square.
Yeah.
And then using optical character recognition, so on, to read signs and so on, to try to identify which entity it actually is.
Well, there's an awful lot of permutations of that could be concerning too. You know, you could theoretically, you could ask Google, here's a picture of a group of 4 people standing in front of a house. Where is it?
Yeah.
You know, to be able to identify the address of that house, that could have some privacy issues that could be really concerning in the wrong hands.
And get half the FBI fired.
You know, so that could be a bone of contention for a lot of people.
If somebody uploaded that to Google Photos, it might have the GPS coordinates for the actual location that picture was taken at.
Yep.
In which case, it might not be that hard for Google to provide that information. I did write about something like that for my blog, where they were talking about Google saving the information to provide recommendations to people of things to take photographs of. They were saving location information for landmarks, photos of landmarks, and people would click on those photos and pretty much indicate which ones they liked the best. And Google would use that information along with that click-through information along with the location information and provide recommendations for people when they're out traveling of where to stop and take pictures from.
Yep. Just a simple method of triangulation. It can start to work out where photos were taken from, and yeah, you know, give those kind of tips. It won't be too long before we've got wearable devices which says, that president you're aiming at, if you move to this balcony, you can get a much better shot.
It sounds like fake news to me.
Sounds almost like something might be chippable there, Ammon.
But this is one of the things that we are going to have to be aware of, that the same technology that can tell you where successful photographs were taken from by processing lots of them can process other photographic and videographic evidence. And we all know that these days cameras are on every battlefield. What's being done in the defense sector with the same sort of technology right now? In fact, did it start with search or did it start with the defense industry?
Well, there's an awful lot that's been implemented already that started at DARPA.
Yeah.
A lot of projects. Some of them accidental, that were not even focused on at DARPA, that they just incidentally found out, hey, did you know you could do this too? And somebody starts a civilian venture over here, supposedly civilian venture, and turns into a nice chunk of industry.
Yeah.
A friend of mine told me about a park up towards the LA where DARPA would perform lots of on-field experiments with different technology.
They had a show in Long Beach when I was living up there many years ago, probably 15 years ago. They did a show up there that was apparently something they would do around the country. They moved venues each year, but they would show some technologies. They didn't really show you much about them. They would just demonstrate, this little battlefield robot that could go and it would actually drive up to a bomb and then come up over the top of it. It would encapsulate the bomb and detonate it. This armored cone. Okay.
That was DARPA, right?
It was DARPA that developed it, and they put on the show, but they showed different camera technologies and communications technology and robotic and stuff like that. Never giving any real information, stuff that was probably already unclassed, but enough to pique your interest.
Yeah.
And the one thing I never did really talk much about was how many hundreds of millions of dollars a year they spent doing this. No, we're not going to talk about that. But yeah, an awful lot of technology that we use right now. It's amazing how much of it actually originated in DARPA.
Oh, yeah.
There was a NASA patent that was a joint collaborative effort from DARPA and NASA where they talked about fleets of space vehicles like insects, like wasps, and you'd have them traveling all together, going from place to place. Big autonomous fleets.
Well, they have a project that has been underway for some time now that I saw something on the online about. That's this hive mind research, where they can actually put drones out. They don't have to have an operator sitting in a trailer someplace 1,000 miles away piloting this drone. They simply upload a program to a satellite, and the satellite communicates to these 80 mini drones to maintain surveillance in this particular geographical area at a certain altitude and take pictures at a certain periodicity. And it's all hive mind. And if one of these drones takes fire, then the rest of the drones take evasive action.
Already this is starting to head towards the private industry. They've been talking about the possibilities of having fireworks shows with no fireworks. These tiny little drones that light up form any kind of light display that they want to in air. And of course, if you've got this ability for these things to move like a school of fish, you can actually completely duplicate a firework display with no pyrotechnics.
Oh, that's terrible. This is the best exercise my dog gets is crawling under the bed when the fireworks go off.
Wasn't 7-Eleven doing drone research with delivery pizzas?
Yeah.
Who?
7-Eleven. Using drones to deliver pizzas. So like Starbucks was using drones to deliver. It wasn't burritos.
Have you ever had a conversation with the delivery driver? They're already using drones.
Yeah, they've been.
Shit for once.
This is nothing new, is it?
Yeah, just organic drones instead.
I've seen DoorDash robots on the streets of San Francisco.
I just saw something yesterday that in Dubai, they have put their first robot cops on the street. And they're saying that by 2030, they intend to be 50% robotic cops.
Is this anything to do with Trump's visit? They were hoping they were going to malfunction. They'd seen RoboCop. They thought, right, our Ed 209 is on the street. What can go wrong?
There you go.
It is one of those things, you know, the success of traffic policing via cameras has been quite exceptional. And of course, computerized, you've then got the things that create pretty advanced traffic control through cameras. So if you're just doing that with robotic eyes and robotic thinking, yeah, you start to think what you can do when, yeah, these drones can be out being the cameras and can be doing it all quite remotely, moving the cameras about where they're needed.
They turned the yellow lights down on those, so they cause more problems sometimes than they solve.
It gives you a reason to accelerate, right?
If you can't stop in time to get from green to red, and you go through the light when you shouldn't be and crash into something, it's not effective.
No.
They may make more money off of it, but
Yes.
not supposed to be the point.
Well, as long as they're not having to pay the medical bills, it's technically a win for them. Unfortunately, you know, this is the tragedy of the commons thing again, where if the people gaining the benefit aren't also the ones who pay the price, it will always be abused, and there will always come a point at which it goes terribly, terribly wrong. Here they use average speeds quite a lot. So you've got a camera in one place and a camera in another place, and it times how long it took you to go from one to the other. And if it's less than the time allowed, you've obviously been speeding, whether they caught you actually doing it or not.
You can tell when you've accidentally blown one of those traffic camera lights off, because you do see a flash from the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then a month or so later in the mail, you do get a letter saying that you owe $200.
Yeah.
Do not pass go, do not collect. Yeah.
Well, you just write "no longer lives at this address" or "deceased" and drop it back in the box.
Only working defense against that at all was to actually question when it had been calibrated. Because if they couldn't prove it had been calibrated very recently beforehand, it's questionable whether it was working right on the day. That's about it.
And that's a defense for DUIs too.
Yeah.
All the equipment calibrated.
Yeah.
And if they can't show it's been calibrated within the past few months, it's potentially problematic. Yeah.
I think it's how America is going to get out of its political problems, is that, you know, after this is all over, they'll just, look, it turned out Trump hadn't been calibrated in a long time. Just ignore it all.
I don't think he's ever been calibrated. I don't think he ever went through QC, to tell you the truth.
It's interesting what they're doing with technology, but it comes back to that thing I'm always saying about SEO. I think sometimes they get so caught up with what the technology can do that they're measuring the wrong things. I am not interested in people measuring speed, because one person can be exceptionally dangerous at 20 because they're not paying proper attention, and another driver is 100% safe at 130. It's not about the speed, and what I'd like to see them concentrating on instead is stopping distances, because on the British roads at least, those are awful. I would say that 90% of cars are not maintaining a proper stopping distance. If that car ahead of them came to a crunching halt from a collision, from something coming the other way, there is no way on earth they could stop in time. Simply because of the laws of physics, nothing to do with their driving abilities.
That and it's worsened by the fact that with your climate, those roadways are often much more slippery than they are, for instance, in Texas or Arizona. Okay.
And technically, we've got these devices now. You know, we've got radar technology, we've got visual technology, where every car could be equipped with a safety device that warns you of the appropriate stopping distance for the road conditions you're currently under. That it would be driver choice, but technically then, if the government wanted to, it could ask for that data to be pinged to their central servers. And I think that would be serious road safety and seriously using the technology for good.
Some cars have that technology built into sensors.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. In fact, I got a client. I just did a comparison of their car, their 2017 model, with the competitors, and I was dumbfounded to see that both of them had standard features. This is a mid-size sedan. Both of them offered as standard features LiDAR, collision warning that would automatically engage the brakes if you didn't respond. You know, when it got to a point of extremis, you know, such a close proximity, if you hadn't taken action, then the car would automatically apply brakes. You know, then this is all standard. I mean, these are options that we knew existed. Like, you can get cars that were parallel park themselves. These cars, by a standard feature, will tell you, turn your wheel all the way to the left, turn your wheel all the way to the right. You know, put it in reverse, put it in forward. You know, it doesn't do it. That's an option.
We get to that very interesting situation from Asimov's story that was in iRobot, where, you know, a robot may consider itself guilty through inaction, or it has to make choices at times. But you do have to wonder, once the technology is possible, once a car manufacturer could save lives, should they? Should this actually then become a requirement on them, and isn't not doing it a choice?
Well, now you're getting really into a sticky area, because if the AI system has to make a decision between allowing this party with 2 individuals in the car to suffer greater damage in order to save this party that has 4 individuals in the car, you know, now you're getting into some serious issues that, hell, most humans I know can't make that decision reliably. I sure as hell don't want to trust it to a machine.
Google has come out with a patent where they have taken those 3 laws of robotics from Asimov and put them in question form and talked about the priorities behind decisions like that.
Some real ramifications.
How they would implement them in technology.
And did they have solutions proffered for all of them?
An ethical dilemma is an ethical dilemma, regardless of whether it's a human being or a robot behind it.
It's interesting, again, how psychology plays into this, because it would be very difficult for manufacturers to produce a car that warns you that you're not having a proper stopping distance. But if they mount the same technology into the rear, and it automatically takes the picture of the car behind you that isn't maintaining a proper stopping distance, everyone will want one, because it's pointing out the other guy's fault. And you know this is true. And once everyone's got that, you've done exactly the same thing, but you've done it through psychology and not having to fight people where, I don't want some computer telling me what to do, but I'm happy for it to tell him what to do.
Well, yeah. Well, you can see that around just about any topic.
It's like our hour is up, so we may have a quick go around. Everybody say goodbye and tell us what they're up to over the next week. Ammon, what are you up to this week coming up?
I've got some training to do at the staff meeting. I'm really kind of just brushing up people's skills. There's no point having different levels of people in the company if we can all share that knowledge together and everyone get more on an equal footing.
Do you have a behind-the-scenes wiki where you can share that type of information?
No, I wouldn't have time. If I had time to fill it in, there would be better uses of my time. But doing a quick training session, and we're going to be focusing this one on the psychology of blogging and how that affects conversions. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting week for me because I love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Doc, your plans for next week?
I've got some personal stuff going on. We've got a contractor coming in to replace the flooring on our stairs and in the living room, and putting in new floors. And as soon as he gets done with that, I'm going to put a new roof over the garage and a little bit of handiwork around the house. So I'll try to fit those things in. He's going to do the work, but I'm going to have to look over his shoulder. So I'll try to fit those things in between everything else.
Yeah.
That'll keep me out of trouble.
Don't let him find your liquor. Otherwise, you'll end up with a house that looks like an Escher painting.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be floor on every surface.
Christian, what are you up to for next week?
We've got some new interns coming in to write kit, so doing intern training, pretty much. Don't laugh.
Well, just interns coming in to do intern things. Yeah.
Well, it's like coming into the summertime, and so we got a new batch of interns because we don't pay them, so they quit like after when they go back to school.
Yeah, these days we call them interns. They used to be called slaves.
So at some
Get my
point,
whips ready.
Do they get college credits for being an intern?
They can. We have had some students that have taken advantage of that and have gotten college credit. Yeah.
so at the end of the season, then they transition from intern to ingrate.
Yeah, like it's pretty rare that that we do take someone on and they become a paid member, but we've had some phenomenal interns that have gone on to like go work for Google, just doing all sorts of different really cool things. Super fun to catch up, and like when you're in something like that, like you're just a family forever. So. Oh, you know what? I want to actually put a word out for one of my family members whose mom is really ill, and he's creating his own crowdfunding site, and he's launching it with his mom, and it's going to be note based, and it's like a mandatory dollar, like if you want to be involved with it, minimum $1, but then you get to write a note, and so that's, I don't know, it's just kind of cool the way that he's doing it. But I'll put a link in, and so anyone can go and check it out. And he's streaming him making the site on Twitch, which is really fun to watch.
Terry? What plans for the week to come?
This week, well, I'm looking at changing the navigation on a website. They originally had a scheme that didn't really distribute PR as well as it should, because they had the site divided up into sections that only link to the other pages in that section. So it took a while, but I got it done eventually when I laid it out for him, showed him how much better. It's the first time I've really looked at 4 or 5 sites in an industry and tried to figure out why one was ranking so much better than the others.
Yeah.
You know what I found out? Links mean almost nothing now.
Huh.
That
Awesome.
the company that won out, it was like it was 1999. They had 10 times as much text on the page. Worst navigation I've seen in a long time. No structured data, nothing that we would usually think, except for they had 8 paragraphs on the pages that ranked that was all relevant.
Wow.
So they had
Yeah,
content people cared about.
Pardon me?
So they had content people cared about.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what it was. They had the least links. The website was by far hardest to look at for any amount of time.
This is one of the things you've heard me say it, Terry. 95% of the links that people are out there building are worth nothing. And it's not that links don't count, it's that Google's got so many of them now, it can afford to ignore any that fall below a certain threshold of trust and certainty. If they aren't certain that this is a genuine link, certain that it's a worthy link, and certain that it's an affirmative vote, they don't have to count it at all.
Yeah,
if you revisit the links that you're looking at again with that mindset, I think you'll see that links are still important.
might be just that particular niche too.
Who,
What I saw was that I was surprised by it because the one that did the best had the fewest links, and even those had the I used Majestic, and the citation and trust flow were not very good either. So it would have explained it if the citation and trust flow was pretty high.
Yeah, Majestic is very good. It crawls Google much the way that Google does. So I love it as a tool. But what they don't have, because they can't, is any way of knowing what Google is choosing to ignore, what Google's tolerance is for certainty. In Bayesian filtering, you always have this probability of good and probability of bad. That's what I believe Google is applying to links, and unless there's a real high trust on that link, it's just not counted. And if there is above a certain threshold of bad, it actually has a negative effect, as per Penguin.
Well, what I saw was the biggest site had over 300,000 links to it, and of the 5, it was in 4th.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, and I don't mean it had a few more links than the other sites.
Oh, no.
We're talking 10 times.
Exactly that. So what did they do to build those links, and what lingering penalty have they got because of what they did to build those links? Because there's no way they happened to get 10 times as many links as all their competitors.
Yeah. Also, when you looked at the trust flow, it was the second lowest of the 5. So it goes along with, it fit my theory that I want quality over quantity all the time. And
Awesome.
I use the Majestic relevance. I call it relevancy tool, but it puts everything into a topic. Yeah. So you know what the topics are that are linking to you.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to look at closer is, I don't know if anyone else has noticed it, but there's been some kind of real shift in the way local results are being calculated now. Because we were rocking and then all of a sudden gone. But there are some speed issues. So I'm hoping if I can get the site back up to the speed it was, that some of this stuff will return, because I think we are getting hit by speed penalties.
Yeah.
Well, not a penalty, but a drag, kind of.
Speed is still so important. If you've got a site that is taking more than 5 seconds for a page to load, you've got serious issues, and that's probably the first place you should look. I want a page to load in under 2 seconds.
That's the thing.
If someone sees your site in search results and they click on your site and then choose another site instead of yours because nothing happens after they've clicked on yours, and they go to another site and click on that and go to that instead, it's a search problem.
Yeah.
It's a speed problem. It's a search problem.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think it really affected. Like we had a lot of like where we were in the local results first one,
Yeah.
like a lot of them, and now we're gone. And it all happened after we changed the site. So I'm not sure if it's architecture. I don't think so, because the architecture is basically the same, but the speed is. We went from a really fast site that I built and tuned to one that's a WordPress on a theme that seems to have some real issues. Like,
have you got caching in on WordPress? Because I mean, obviously that helps. W3 Super Cache and several other cache plugins will help massively with speed.
Did that? Every image is being brought down to the lowest it can go.
Yeah.
There are, but in the theme itself, there seems to be some issues with database connections that I can't. And I think that's what the problem.
Sometimes you get one where it's badly coded. It's just making too many calls on the database for lookups that it didn't really need.
Actually, I think it's where it goes to make a call and can't find what it wants in the database and doesn't close the connection.
Oh.
So if you don't close the connection, that is, believe me, if you know Microsoft, you know about lag and what open files can do, like memory leakage, bad. And
yeah.
I think that's what I'm dealing with. In the end, I think the company's going to have to change the theme because no amount of digging into it and trying to fix it. It's using a program that hasn't had support. It's built into the theme that hasn't had support in 3 years.
Yeah, it's time to consider that.
Yeah, but after the company has spent thousands redesigning the website.
Bill, you're going to have to very quickly tell us what you're up to next week, Bill, and then close us out.
Sorry.
Okay, that'll do. I'm going to keep on looking at that authoritative sites patent and write something up about it because there is some really interesting stuff in there. It's worth sharing. So I may spend part of today and tomorrow doing that. Thank you, everybody. Take care now.